You are listening to Drive Time. Let's get more on our top story this hour. The Scottish Government says schools must provide separate toilets for boys and girls in new guidance issued after two landmark court rulings. The guidance says facilities must be made available on the basis of biological sex, but that schools can also provide gender-neutral toilets. Schools had previously been told that trans pupils could use whatever toilets they felt most comfortable in. The Supreme Court ruled earlier this year that the term sex in the Equality Act of 2010 referred to biological sex. Jenny Gilruth, the Cabinet Secretary for Education, has been speaking to my colleague Graham Stewart.
The government has made clear that we accept the Supreme Court ruling, and since April we've been taking forward the necessary detailed work as a consequence of the ruling in respect of our transgender guidance in schools. So as Education Secretary, I want every pupil to be able to reach their potential, and every pupil deserves our support in doing that. So our refreshed guidance means that all of their individual needs will be respected, and all schools, of course, in Scotland are already required to provide separate toilets for girls and boys. In addition, the guidance makes very clear that councils should give careful consideration to the individual needs of transgender pupils in light of the school context and their school community.
Now, if there aren't gender-neutral toilets available in a school, do trans pupils therefore have to use the toilet which aligns with their biological gender?
Well, look, I think it's important to say that in Scotland, our councils carry the statutory responsibility for the delivery of education. So we've been very clear that any individual decisions need to be undertaken with local authorities, with parents, with the community and with the wider school. But the schools guidance has been amended, for example, to recognise the clarification of the definition of sex in the Equality Act 2010, and that follows from the Supreme Court judgment decision. But it's also been updated to amend advice on toilets, on changing rooms and on residential accommodation. But the specific change here, I think, that relates to your question, Graham, is that the guidance makes clear that schools and education authorities need to make those decisions based on individual circumstances of pupils. And many of my friends are head teachers and teachers in schools just now. Most schools in Scotland have boys' toilets, they have girls' toilets, and they also often have gender-neutral provision. They're also required by law to have an accessible provision as well. So many schools already have this type of approach, but it was important that we updated our national guidance to be in line and to be very clear with the ruling in relation to the Supreme Court, and that's exactly what the update today has provided.
Why are you leaving it to the schools, though? I mean, shouldn't it be fairly simple that if you're a trans boy, you know whether you can use the boys' or the girls' toilets?
I think it's important that we update the guidance in line with the legal requirements as stipulated in the Supreme Court ruling. There have also been other legal changes in recent times, and we've taken time to reflect on those changes and to update our guidance. But of course, the guidance that we can produce and provide as a government in Scotland is non-statutory in nature. That's because the legal power to run Scotland schools rests with our local authorities.
Just to be clear, to give one example then, would it be acceptable for a trans girl to use a girl's toilet?
So it's very difficult for me as Education Secretary to comment on specific examples, Graham. You'll understand that because I don't know the nature of the case, the nature of the individual involved.
But it's a general principle though, isn't it?
I hear the point that you're making, but that would be a matter for the individual education authority to engage with parents and carers, to engage with the head teacher, but also to engage with their wider school community. You know, we don't foist decisions on schools in Scotland. We work with our education authorities, with our head teachers.
Okay,
we did exactly the same.
But what about parents? What about parents that might be concerned by that? Parents who don't believe in trans rights, they might object against this and say, well, actually, the spirit of the law would suggest that, you know, children should use the toilet that aligns with their biological sex.
I understand that, and I understand that there may be parents who have those concerns, but that's why, of course, the revised guidance talks about the need for education authorities and schools to take decisions in relation to the individual.
So essentially it is up to the schools then. I mean, this sounds like a bit of a mess, doesn't it? That different schools could have different policies and no one really knows what the principle is.
No, because the law is very clear in relation to biological sex, and that, of course, has been stipulated by the Supreme Court ruling. So the guidance has been updated in that regard.
But you've not, you say that you can't say to me whether a trans pupil should or should not visit a toilet which aligns with their biological sex. You say that you can't tell me the answer to that.
I say to you, Graham, that decision has to be informed by the individual needs and circumstances of that pupil.
Which means the policy could be different in every school up and down the country.
Well, it would depend on the individual needs of the circumstances of the young person, for example. And of course, there are a range of different approaches in schools in relation to toilet provision, but there are legal requirements in relation to the 1967 regulations for boys' and girls' toilets at the current time that all schools have to adhere to.
Why has it taken so long to come out with this guidance? The Supreme Court ruling was absolutely clear. The Equalities Commission gave an initial judgment, some months ago. Why is it taking so long?
We've been engaged on this for many months now. Actually, I was discussing this with officials earlier on since the end of April. So it has taken some time to get us to this place, but it's really important we move forward as a consequence of the ruling, and this guidance provides clarity in that regard.
That was Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth speaking to my colleague Graham Stewart.